This video is brought to you by Hit Point Press and the Fablemaker's Animated Tarot. This beautiful animated tarot deck will add some magical flair to your 5e games. Pre-order at animatedtarot.com. And by Steamforged Games and their Epic Encounters series. With just one box, you can run an awesome cinematic adventure that your players will never forget. Use our link below the video to see all the Epic Encounter adventures. Hello and welcome to the Gallant Goblin. We have fallen a little bit behind in our Pathfinder Roundup coverage, so we're going to be making up some ground today. So this video is going to be rather long. It is the Pathfinder Adventure Hour with Theo. Welcome. You are more than welcome to come along with me for the whole ride, or you can use a segmented timeline below me to jump to whatever you're interested in. I promise I won't be upset if you jump around. As always, we'll start with maps that players of all fantasy TTRPGs might enjoy. Then we have a deck of cards that can enhance your games. And then we'll delve into 2 new rulebooks, The Secrets of Magic and Guns and Gears, the new lore books, Monsters of Myth and Absalom, City of Lost Omens. And we got some adventures, starting with the standalone high-level adventure Night of the Great Death, and then volumes 3, 4, and 5 of The Strength of Thousands, which is shaping up to maybe be the best 2nd edition AP yet. And then we'll talk about several new Pathfinder Society scenarios that you can run. And can I just say that that's just been like 3 or 4 months of Pathfinder content, and I'm probably leaving some things out. Their output is just unbelievable. And many thanks to Paizo for sending us all this material that we'll be covering today. Now, one of the biggest things that's come to Pathfinder in recent months is the launch of Pathfinder Infinite, which is rather like what DM's Guild is for D&D. It is a place where anyone can use the Pathfinder lore and rules to publish their own material to expand the games in ways that interest them. If you'd like to write and sell a Pathfinder adventure, a new class, a new ancestry, or even like a short story, you can visit pathfinderinfinite.com to learn how. And I wanted to tell you quickly about our Pathfinder Infinite project. We decided to bring together queer voices in the creator community to create an in-world queer travel magazine focused on Absalom, the city at the center of the world. It is called Queerfinder, and it has articles and magic items and locations that you can explore, loads of new NPCs with adventure hooks, there's even real-life recipes, and it is all fully illustrated with some gorgeous art and photographs. We have loads of great collaborators, including Michelle Jones, who also wrote one of the Strength of Thousands books that we'll be looking at today. We also have a deep dive of Michelle Wynn Bradley's character from Paizo's actual play of Troubles in Otari. There's so much here, we are so proud of it, and you can go pick up issue 1 right now using our link below the video or at queerfinder.org. We even have Queerfinder pens that we're going to get made that are gorgeous, so be on the lookout for that. Now let's take a look at some official Pathfinder material, starting as always with flip mats. I have 3 to show you this time, starting with the Ghost Town. This is a standard size flip mat, meaning it's 24 inches by 30 inches with 1-inch squares for gameplay. Like all the maps, it folds down into an 8.5 by 11-inch form for ease of storage. I do recommend laying a few heavy books or board games on it a few hours or overnight before you plan to use it to help it lay flat. One side of the map features a ruined, abandoned town with a nice cathedral at its center. You've got farmhouses, a graveyard, and a dried-up fountain at the center. The other side features a ruined town square with a massive sinkhole or ravine at the center, possibly an entrance to or exit from the Darklands. As always, the maps can be written on with a wet or dry erase marker. These standard size flip mats have an MSRP of $14.99. Our next standard map is for the adventure Night of the Great Death and includes the maps that you'll find on the inside cover of that adventure, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in this video. On one side, we have the Grand Ballroom, which is where the action in Chapter 2 of the adventure takes place. The ballroom features a stage area, a buffet table, several corners with tables and chairs, a few side rooms, and of course a towering guillotine at the center of the room to remind everybody why they're there. This could be a reusable map for all sorts of fancy ball encounters, but you are going to have to either explain why there's a guillotine present or just tell your players to ignore it. The opposite side of the map features, well, I won't say the name of this room as I don't want to provide spoilers at this point in the video, but it includes areas L15 through L18, which is where the climax of the adventure is likely to occur. You have a partially collapsed roof, some rooms with sarcophagi or altars, and some statues. This is definitely a map you can use for some nice temple or dungeon encounters outside of this adventure. adventure. Once again, it has an MSRP of $14.99 and can be a great help if you're running Knight of the Grey Death. If you want to jump ahead to that review, check out the timestamps below me. Our last flip mat of the season is a multi-pack, the Jungle. A multi-pack includes 2 standard flip size mats centered around a particular theme, and this time it is the jungle. They're otherwise exactly the same size and material as your regular flip mats. Our first map features an overgrown ruin in a mountainous area with trails, a mountain stream, several ruined buildings with collapsed roofs, and a large temple structure that also seems to be falling apart with a large archway leading into it. There's a statue of a manticore-looking beast at the center, perhaps teasing an encounter with the creature that the people who lived here used to venerate. On the opposite side is a more generic jungle map on a plateau with some trails, a river, and a lot of flora. Perhaps one of those trails eventually leads to the collapsed town. Now, of course, this jungle map isn't some unexplored, unsettled, undiscovered country, not with all those footpaths. Plus, there's a single statue along one of the paths of some sort of other strange horned creature. Luckily, it's ambiguous enough that you can make it fit pretty much whatever story you want to tell. The next map features a winding mountain trail eventually leading to an occupied village of 6 huts and a smoldering campfire. One nice thing about this multi-pack, and perhaps this is true of all the multi-packs, this is just the first one that I've reviewed, is that all the maps in here feel like chapters in a story. You could buy this pack for Pathfinder, D&D, Starfinder, whatever game you're playing, and write your own little mini-campaign just using these 4 maps. I could see this being your starting area, where you learn about a threat to the village up in the mountains that the party is asked to investigate. So where might the final encounter of this little mini campaign take place? How about at the massive hole in the ground? It doesn't look like a natural sinkhole, though perhaps that's how it started. There's a spiraling path leading down into the earth. Maybe it was once a place for mining, but something ended up crawling out of it from the Darklands or from the Underdark. Or perhaps this is not where the final encounter of your mini campaign takes place. Maybe you need to venture down into the hole to continue the investigation. Another thing to remember is that you'll often find future Pathfinder Society scenarios designed around one of these multi-packs. So if you don't want to craft an adventure all by yourself, you can wait until one of those Paizo designers does it for you. The Pathfinder Flip Mat Jungle Multi-Pack is available right now for $24.99 or $17.99 for the digital versions of the maps. Moving on to flip tiles now, let's start with the Fortress, Walls, and Towers expansion for the Fortress starter set. We reviewed that starter set in our last video, which again you can see in the eye in the corner of your screen. This set adds 24 new double-sided tiles that feature defensive walls, watchtower roofs, stairways, damaged sections of the walls, the interiors of the watchtowers, and some open ground or inside or outside the walls. Here we can see a nice defensive wall set that I built with just the expansion tiles, and what it looks like when I add in the actual little fortress from the starter set. The tiles open up a lot of room for creativity, and of course, just like the flip mats, you can write on them with dry or wet erase markers if you like. One other neat thing is that the expansion sets can actually be stored inside the starter set's box to keep things tidy. I love that. The Fortress, Walls, and Towers expansion has an MSRP of $19.99, or you can get them digitally for $13.99. Next, we have the Dungeon Crypts expansion set for the Dungeon starter set. It also comes with 24 double-sided tiles, which include tomb halls, burial chambers, reliquaries, mysterious shrines, stairways, and winding catacombs. Unfortunately, I don't have the Dungeon starter set to really show you what kind of builds you can make with these combined sets, and again, it's hard to make decent-sized maps with just the expansion sets alone, though it is possible. But this set could be a lot of fun if you're exploring ancient crypts in Osiriia, or even some haunted catacombs from Curse of Strahd or Tomb of Annihilation. There are a lot of skeletons in here to potentially cause some commotion. This set also comes in at $19.99. Our last map pack of the day is a unique one. This is the City of Lost Omens poster map Folio. These aren't flip mats intended to be used with minis. This is a collection of 4 single-sided poster maps of Absalom. Each map is 21¼ by 32½ inches. They're designed to be placed next to each other to create a monstrous 42½ by 65-inch map of Absalom that you can hang on your wall. It is so big that I have to use the floor to put them all together for you. This is a companion piece to the Absalom City of Lost Omens lore book that we'll be talking about in just a little bit. This is an art piece as much as it is a player reference. If you're playing in a campaign set in Absalom, this is a great thing to hang on your game room wall. It is the largest city map ever produced for Pathfinder. There are 240 locations that are marked on this map that correspond to locations in the City of Lost Omens book. The inside cover of the map folio provides a little key, but you'll need the full lore book to get all those details. You can pick up the City of Lost Omens poster map folio for an MSRP of $24.99. Next, we have reference cards, and you know how much I like reference cards. If you've been watching our playthrough of Troubles in Otari, you may have seen us bust this out, the Pathfinder Hero Point deck. In Pathfinder, players earn hero points that they can spend to stabilize themselves when they're dying or to re-roll a failed check. Well, this deck introduces 52 new ways to use those hero points. When players earn a hero point, such as at the start of each session, they get to draw a card, which gives them a special one-time ability. Let's take a look at just a couple because half the fun is being surprised. Spark of Courage. Play when you have the frightened condition. Lose a condition and gain a +2 status bonus to attack rolls and skill checks until the end of your next turn. Push through the pain. Play before you make a fortitude save and you succeed without needing to roll, but you gain the drained 1 condition. Clutch when you need it though. Okay, Shake It Off. Benji played this one in one of our recent sessions. Play at any time and end all persistent damage affecting you. The Taylor Swift card. This deck is awesome, and I am never playing Pathfinder without it. It just adds so much fun and sets up so many moments for the players to feel like they have the exact thing that they need in a certain situation, and that's one of the best feelings you can have when you play a TTRPG. You can pick this one up at an MSRP of $14.99 or get the PDF version for $10.49. Now on to spell cards. We're going to have a review and an interview video for the new Secrets of Magic book coming out really soon, but in the meantime, you can get a complete collection of the spell cards right now. This box comes with a card for every spell from the book. They're all sorted by tradition, so you've got arcane spells, divine, occult, and primal, plus focus spells. They each have their own card back and color to help you keep them organized. As you may know, some spells appear on more than one spell list. When that's the case, you'll get extra copies of that spell card, so every tradition will have a full deck. Most cards will have art on the front and the spell details on the back. Now, some spells are pretty long, and for those that use the front and the back of the same card to make sure you get as much information as they can give you. For a few of the super long spells, they give you an abbreviated version of the spell text and tell you on which page the actual spell is on, so you can go reference it in the book. The cards are arranged by tradition, and then they're in alphabetical order. They aren't sorted by spell level. If I counted correctly, you get 117 arcane spell cards, 71 divine, 102 occult, 87 primal, and 27 focus spells, plus a card with instructions for a grand total of 405 cards. I like the storage box for this one too. It definitely makes finding the cards you want a lot easier. One more thing that would have been helpful are little dividers to keep the traditions separated, but I'm just a sucker for organization. You can pick up the Secrets of Magic spell cards for $54.99 right now, and stay tuned for our full review and interview for Secrets of Magic coming very soon. Now let's talk about some of the big books that have come out recently. First, let me just touch on Secrets of Magic. This fantastic book gives you all sorts of expanded lore on the magic system of Pathfinder, which I loved. To me, the way magic works in D&D is kind of ambiguous and a little bit wishy-washy, but this book makes magic in Pathfinder make so much more sense, which opens up a lot of story potential and really helps to make all the caster classes in Pathfinder feel really distinct. This book also introduces the Magus and Summoner classes to 2nd edition and gives you tons of new spells and magic items, including really fun new types of items like special material components to alter your spells, just all sorts of stuff. We will have that video for you very soon about some of the details of the book, and we'll talk to the lead designer of the book, Logan Bonner, about how the book came together, so please be sure you're subscribed so you can see that. We also had Guns and Gears, which I really also need to make a full video about because this book is just so much fun. It also introduces 2 really fun new classes in the Gunslinger and the Inventor, who works with clockwork. Plus, there are a ton of new archetypes, backgrounds, vehicles, siege engines, clockwork-style gadgets, and the new automaton ancestry, not to mention loads of guns for the Gunslinger and a gazetteer explaining how these steampunky guns and gizmos fit into the world of Golarion. with a highlight on the city of Alkenstar, which you'll be hearing more about from us very soon as well. So stay tuned for our full video and perhaps an interview for that one as well in the coming weeks. Both Secrets of Magic and Guns and Gears are available now for $49.99 each or digitally for $14.99. And you can get them with a special edition cover or pick them up on Pathfinder Nexus, Hero Lab Online, Roll20, or access the gameplay rules for free on Archives of Nethys. Here we have the next Lost Omens lore book, Monsters of Myth. This book highlights 20 of the most legendary monsters on Golarion. The book is 127 pages long and focuses on helping you craft mini campaigns around each creature. I'm hopefully going to do a separate video on this book as well, but let me give you the lowdown here. Each monster gets 6 pages of content, including lore, guidance on crafting adventures around them for various levels of play, and stat blocks for most of them. Then each one has something a little special, maybe stat blocks for minions, archetypes related to that monster, NPC allies, treasures and items that you might collect when fighting them, related hazards and traps, new spell options and rituals, new diseases they may inflict, a new witch patron in the Mosquito Witch, and a new companion. But the monsters are here. I'm not going to try to pronounce them because that will get me into some trouble, but you do get a diverse range of big bads for your campaigns, from Kaiju to Krampus, from the Sandpoint Devil to the Melfesh Monster, and the book is beautifully illustrated as well. This is a great book for GMs, especially those who like to homebrew their own campaigns. You're going to come out of this book with a dozen mini campaigns that you're going to want to run. You can pick up Monsters of Myth for an MSRP of $34.99 or $24.99 for the digital version. Whew. And finally, we have the big mama of them all, Absalom, City of Lost Omens. This book is just epic, and I'm aiming also to do a separate video about it as well if I can make it work and if I have the time. This is just a giant lore book all about the city at the center of the world, Absalom. It's got 250 locations to visit in the city and 400 NPCs to meet. I always say that 5e D&D really suffers from not really having any lore books to flesh out its setting beyond the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. This is the opposite of that. If you as a game master want to run an adventure that takes place in Absalom, with this on your shelf, you are going to be able to make that setting feel as real as any city in real life. Everything from the transportation system to coinage to festivals to guides, noble houses, holidays, waste disposal to how you can expect to get your morning newspaper. It is all here. And one of the best parts of the book is the history, because as you may know, each Pathfinder adventure path takes place canonically after the previous one. So all of those adventure paths occurred whether you play them or not. And so did the Pathfinder Society scenarios. This book shows you the history of the city up through, I believe, the beginning of Agents of Edgewatch. So you can see how they impacted, how those stories impacted on the city and what echoes of the choices that were made still remain. And if you did play those adventure paths, you may have to adjust some of this accordingly. The book also comes with a large map of Absalom, though of course it's not as large as the one in the poster pack that we talked about a little while ago. Now, this isn't really a book for players. Unlike some of the Lost Omens books, including Monsters of Myth, there aren't a lot of player options sprinkled in here. There is a very brief adventurer's toolbox at the end that gives us a new ancestry, the Azarketi, also known as the Gilman or the Loas Land. They were the citizens of Aslant who were transformed after Earthfall into aquatic servants by the Agolthus. That's also always a hard one for me to say. The book gives us the usual ancestry information, including 5 heritages and their ancestry feat trees, plus some ancestral weapons. The book also gives you 4 new drugs that you can find in the city, but that's about it for player content. So this is a very specific book. This is an exhaustive, detailed, and colorful guide to Absalom. If that's something that appeals to you, maybe if you're running the Agents of Edgewatch adventure path, or another story set in Absalom, or you want to craft your own stories using the multitudes of adventure hooks in this book, then this is going to be your baby. Otherwise, you may not need this one. What it does very well though, and not every book needs to be everything to all people. I appreciate self-contained volumes like this. You can pick up Absalom, City of Lost Omens for an MSRP of $54.99, or get the PDF version for $38.49. And I'll take this moment to mention that Beetle and Grimm's is launching their deluxe edition of this book with all sorts of Beetle and Grimm's goodies very soon, and we'll be covering that when we get it, hopefully very soon now. All right, now we're up to our adventures. Let's start with our standalone adventure module, Night of the Great Death by our friend Ron Lundeen. We don't have a lot of standalone adventures yet for Pathfinder 2nd edition, so I am super psyched for each one that comes out. The book itself is about 71 pages long, and it's an adventure for 16th level characters. They should be 19th level when they finish the adventure. There's certainly enough content here for 30 hours of gameplay, I'm guessing, give or take a lot, depending on how you play your games. It should take you about as much time as your typical single adventure path book. For a lot of us, organizing full campaigns with everyone's schedule is nigh impossible. But getting people for a short-term campaign like this should be much more doable. And if you're wanting to try out high-level Pathfinder play in a short-term format like this, here's your ticket. And because it's a high-level adventure, you get to tackle a high-level, country-level problem. That country is Gault. The problem is the Grey Gardeners. Gault used to be a relatively nice place to live, known for its artists and philosophers and poets. It was a vassal nation of Cheliax before Cheliax was taken over by House Thrune and Asmodeus. Once that happened and Eridan died, Gault rebelled against Cheliax and its own noble ruling class. It was a revolution. But then things never settled down. Since then, it's been revolution after revolution after revolution. Over 10 governments have been toppled, and at the center of it all has been the Grey Gardeners and their guillotines. They have been the only stable force in Gault. They are the country's masked executioners, and beyond that, they're kind of a mystery. Well, it's finally time for some heroes to infiltrate their ranks, figure out exactly what force is really behind the Grey Gardeners and their magical guillotines, and then topple them from the inside. Maybe. Beyond that, I don't want to give you too many spoilers here, but if you plan to play this adventure as a player, you may want to use the segmented timeline below me to jump forward a bit, as I want to give the GMs a better taste about what this adventure has to offer. Okay then. Like many Paizo adventures, it's broken into 3 chapters. In Chapter 1, the party learns about a masquerade ball that the Grey Gardeners are holding, where they claim they will unmask themselves. Chapter 1 is a sandbox investigation where they gather information about what's going on and try to secure themselves invitations to the ball. They have 3 days to get them. Chapter 2 takes place in one long evening at the masquerade itself and has quite a few fun events that you don't normally get to partake in games like this. Here's where the PCs will learn about what's really going on and try to rescue as many innocents as they can. And, oh, hello, Tilly. You can see Tilly there. What's going on? And to try to rescue as many innocents as they can in that chapter. And then we get to Chapter 3, which is a bit more of a dungeon crawl with a final fight with the big bad. Good adventures involve tough player choices, and the final encounter here could very well have some choices that the players will always remember. The adventure toolbox at the back has a bestiary, a gazetteer for the city of Latron in Gault, some powerful new magical items as well, and there's also a Grey Gardener archetype that's meant to be used at the end of this campaign when the old Grey Gardener organization has been broken and they're trying to reform as hopefully a more morally upright organization. The archetype is a spin-off of the Vigilante archetype from the Advanced Player's Guide. Overall, this looks to be a really memorable and fun adventure. If you're ready for high-level 2nd edition gameplay, check this one out. And don't forget that there's a flip mat available as well, we talked about earlier. Night of the Great Death has an MSRP of $22.99 and the PDF is $15.99. Next, we have the 3rd, 4th, and 5th books of the Strength of Thousands adventure path. You can see my review of the first 2 books in our last update. If you happen to be one of my usual players checking out this video, maybe skip ahead because I may very well run this myself one day. So let's start with book number 3, Hurricane's Howl by Michelle Jones. Again, spoilers here for anyone who's planning to be a player in this adventure. At this point in the story, the PCs have graduated from the Magambia and have become teachers there. In this adventure, you're taking your first class on a field trip to some ruins at the edge of the Mwangi Expanse. The adventure goes from level 8 to 12. The adventure has a nice low-key start as the players figure out what their life as a teacher looks like for them. They figure out what they're going to teach, meet their students, pick out their offices, meet with the other faculty members. It's pretty nice. Eventually, one student goes missing, though. They received a letter that their hometown needed them because of an emergency, so they packed up and headed directly there. Eventually, the other students and presumably the PC teachers decide to follow them to help out. With some help from the administrators, they decide to turn it into a class assignment for some practical research near the students' village, and so they head out to the small fishing village of Q2 on the Terwa River. Once they arrive, they find out that the Knights of Abendego are staging some kidnappings in the town. The PCs eventually trace them back to an old Cyclopean mountainside prison. It's up to the PCs to dive into the caves, put an end to the threat, and rescue the kidnapped prisoners. The PCs get to spend quite a lot of time in the village, like months really. There they can engage in some practical research, which is described in Book 1, Kindled Magic, of the same adventure path. They'll be doing archaeological work in some nearby ruins. If it all goes well, it can even open up some new archetype feats. Alternatively, they can spend that time helping to restore the rundown village of Kyutu. In the last chapter, the heroes make their way to the town of Jula, which serves as a home base for the Knights of Abendego, but with some effort, the heroes can really rally the town to rebel against them and to help throw them out. The Battle of Jula will be different depending on how much help the PCs are able to gather in that community, which is a lot of fun. And then it's a dungeon dive to the end of the adventure. The toolbox at the end of this adventure presents information about the settlement of Jula, some new loot and spells, and those archetype feats for the Dragon Disciple archetype, for the Cloud Dragon in particular. And of course, there is the bestiary with new monsters and some new Eruxi stat blocks. And finally, we get deep dives into 3 of the most important NPCs in the adventure. Having not run the adventure myself, it's hard to give you a detailed review, but the adventure has what I'm always looking for, which is varied experiences doing more than just dungeon fights. There's a lot of opportunity for role-playing and a lot of time to develop relationships with the students and the townsfolk. It doesn't seem particularly tied into the meta plot so much, though there are certainly some threads there. This adventure seems a bit more standalone. And let's move on to book number 4 here, Secrets of the Temple City by the prolific Luis Loza. This adventure takes the characters from level 12 up to 15. In this adventure, the PCs join a diplomatic delegation to the city of Mazzali, where an undead god king named Walkina is ruling with a cruel iron fist. The PCs aren't being sent to assassinate him or to incite a revolution. That's not how the Migambia operates. They are being sent to work diplomatically with Walkina to hopefully convince him to open the city up to outsiders, which is the first step needed for systemic change. This time, we're leaving these students behind, but you do have a delegation of NPCs accompanying you on this trip. And it really is a negotiation in Chapter 1, using the influence system established in the Game Mastery Guide. If you want a taste of this system, one of the Pathfinder society scenarios that we'll be talking about later uses it, so you can stay tuned for that. The fate of the city really depends on the negotiating skills of the PCs, but Walkina does have a request of them before he's willing to enact any changes. He needs them to secure an abandoned temple outside of the city which houses several important artifacts that he wants to recover. So, we're off to Chapter 2, which is essentially a dungeon crawl which culminates in the discovery of artifacts which point the heroes to the legendary lost city of gold in the eastern portion of the Screaming Jungle. So once their business is wrapped up in Mazzali, the heroes are probably ready to find that lost city. The heroes have will have an appropriately eventful trip through the jungle and eventually find the city and learn its secrets, which I will leave you to discover. But it isn't long before Walkina makes a move to take the city over for himself. Shocker. And it is up to the heroes to help defend it. And at the end, big spoiler alert here, 3, 2, 1, the heroes learn that the legendary founder of the Migambia, Old Mage Jatembe, still lives, and he can be found on the planet Akiton. Luckily, there is a portal the heroes can use if they'd like to make the trip themselves, which will lead us into our next adventure. Before we move on, though, the toolbox at the end here gives you lots of information about the other teachers at the Migambia to help you flesh out your university scenes. There's a deep dive into Walkina and the religion surrounding him. There's enough information for a PC to be a member of that religion with their champion or cleric if they like. There's also another religion presented here of an incomplete god known as Dodger Mube? I don't know how to pronounce that. Plus, there's new magic items and the Bright Lion archetype. The Bright Lions are the resistance forces in Mazzali fighting back against Walkina's cruelty. You can find more Bright Lion feats in the Lost Omens Legend book that we reviewed in the eye in the corner of your screen right now. And, of course, there's more monsters and more bios of the other important NPCs. Now, this book is getting a lot of positive reviews. It is such a rich setting, and this adventure path is shaping up to be A great one for players who may like to find other approaches rather than violence to every situation. And there's certainly still enough combat here to keep things interesting. The adventure, again, focuses on politics and negotiations with real stakes involved. And if you and your players have started to fall in love with the deep and interesting lore of the Mwangi Expanse, this adventure is really going to be special to them. And it's full of wonderfully fleshed out and diverse NPCs that should be easy for you to bring to life. But come on, isn't it time to leave Golarion, don't you think? That takes us to our next book. Volume 5 of The Strength of Thousands. It's called Doorway to the Red Star by Michael Sayer. You know that we're going to Akiton. The players know we're going to Akiton. Now we have to make it happen. First, the players need to learn about Akiton, and they need to finish out their semester. They're still teachers, after all. I worked in the school system, and I can tell you it is not looked upon kindly when teachers just up and leave the planet in the middle of the semester. And the gateway to Akiton isn't just like at the local train station down the road. The PCs need to plan an expedition to some of the Mwangi Expanse's oldest ruins, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. The first chapter alone just has so much great stuff. Again, The Strength of Thousands really plays to those characters and players who want to have more out of an adventure than combat. We start off with a robust series of research opportunities using the research mechanics introduced in Game Mastery Guide. They have to figure out how and when to access the gate, who guards it, and what to expect on the other side. And there are several events that happen at the Magambia that the PCs need to take care of, including negotiating with a sovereign dragon who shows up at the school demanding the return of some of the treasure that the dragon claims was stolen by adventurers and sold to the university. Then they have to help a fellow teacher who thinks he's being stalked. There is an impromptu field trip with an etymology class to observe the behavior of some oversized insects. There's an opportunity to be an assistant in an advanced summoning class where the heroes will participate in a planar binding ritual. You have to help a dude find his missing ramen food truck, essentially. And finally, you have a guy who sees a rainbow on a sunny day and thinks it's a sign that a rune lord is rising. It's just kind of shot after shot after shot of amazing encounters, and that's just like the first half of chapter 1. Once they actually make the trek to the ruins, they have to either negotiate or fight or sneak their way to the gate, and in the process they should learn more about the big bad known as the King of Biting Ants, whom Old Mage Shitembe was fighting. The heroes need to go defeat a lich to gather some powerful artifacts to secure access to the gate, and to assure that they can defeat the big bad. After all this, finally, through the looking glass to Mars, Akiton, and who do they meet? The Contemplatives, who are so much fun. They are kind of the stereotypes of most pretentious philosophers taken to the extreme. They're not evil, but the most pedantic people that you're ever likely to meet. Their research on Akiton has opened up all sorts of planar doorways, and when the heroes arrive, the research facility is just like overrun, and the heroes have to help reclaim the space. Once they do, they get more information about what's going on. One cool thing about this adventure path, all these books, is that there is a lot of downtime where the characters have the opportunity to engage in research projects. You can set up a project here at the Hall of Reason on Akiton and make progress in your studies and potentially even unlock Akitonian as a new language you can speak. But at this point, it is off to the nearby town of Seldo, where it turns very Star Wars-y. The King of Biting Ants is on an airship, and the heroes are going to have to get on their own vehicles to catch him. Then you're off dealing with Shobods and Yusoki and a cantina, and well, it's very Star Wars-y. Eventually, the heroes end up on sand racers, cruising across the Akitonian desert, chasing the airship, and it's just go buy this. Just go buy it. Just drop whatever you're doing right now. Tell your gaming group that you are transitioning your Rise of Tiamat adventure into Strength of Thousands, and just go play this. I'm going to leave Chapter 3 and all its great set pieces and revelations for you to discover. I will add that the toolbox at the end of the adventure highlights Akiton and its inhabitants, including the Formians, the Ikeshti, the Shobods, and the Yosoki. You may be familiar with all of them from Starfinder. You get information on the settlements of Seldo. There's new magical items, including a spell-absorbing cursed sword that can't harm living creatures, and a fancy new grimoire for your arcane-prepared spellcasters. There's new spells and rituals from the Contemplatives. There's a new Shobod weapon, and of course, the Sand Racer, plus the Bestiary. I'm so impressed with this adventure path so far. Out of all the second edition paths that have been released this far, this is the one that I'm most excited about. I may have to find a way to run this myself. Book 6, Shadows of the Ancients, has sadly been delayed as they wait for the printed copies to arrive. You know how shipping is these days, so we're gonna have to be patient. It looks like we might get our hands on it by the end of February, maybe, and you'll get full coverage of it when we get our hands on it. But yes, each book in Strength 1000 Adventure Path so far has been solid. We're going to get to this in a second. The gameplay is varied, and it really should feel like time is passing and the PCs are growing and changing. This isn't one of those paths where heroes go from level 1 to 10 in like a week of in-game time. I think it's very much worth checking out, and fingers crossed that the final issue really nails that landing. Next time, we're going to start looking at the next adventure path. Right here, Quest for the Frozen Flame, starting with Broken Tusk Moon by Ron and Stephanie Lundeen. Be sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on this book. All right, if you're wanting something much smaller in scope, we've had quite a few Pathfinder Society modules come out since we last had a Pathfinder Roundup. If you are playing in the Pathfinder Society organized play system, you may want to skip this section lest you be spoiled. I am going to give you a few thoughts on each one because my goal here is to help GMs find modules that they may want to run in their home games. Each of these modules is available on Paizo.com digitally for $5.99, and while they're designed for organized play, you can certainly run them for your home games, and this has the added benefit of you being able to make alterations to them as you see fit. We are in Season 3 of the Pathfinder Society. This season is called The Year of the Shattered Sanctuaries. This season, the Pathfinder Society itself is in the crosshairs. I reviewed the intro adventures to the season in our last Pathfinder video, which again is up in the eye in the corner of your screen. So let's start with Scenario 2, The East Hill Haunting by Nicole Heights for levels 1 to 4. Now, in the Pathfinder Society, there's always a season-wide meta plot. Some scenarios will advance that plot, others are more standalone, and some are multi-part mini-arcs that explore the happenings at certain lodges in the Inner Sea region. This particular adventure scenario, Scenario 2, is a meta-plot module and is the first of a two-parter that takes place in the Andorran city of Almas, where the PCs are called in to assist in the day-to-day functioning of the lodge there, but they soon get pulled into investigating a strange haunting that seems to be taking place in the city. It is followed up by Scenario 5, which we'll talk about shortly. Most scenarios make use of various flip mats. If you have them, it makes running the adventures very easy. If not, you can draw or design your own as you see fit. This scenario makes use of the Ambush Sites multi-pack and the Haunted House flip mats. Folks are saying that this is a pretty great scenario with an intriguing mystery and well-designed hazards and haunts, but the final encounter can be tricky, so consider how you want to approach it when you're planning it out. Scenario 3 is Echoes of Desperation by Mike Kimmel and Nate Wright for levels 3 to 6. This is a standalone adventure in the capital city of Althusis, I don't know that one, in Vidrium in the Mwangi Expanse. The heroes are asked to investigate the origins of a magical item that first takes them to a shipwreck and then into the jungle to a halfling village that needs a little assistance in fighting off a threat from some ravenous fey creatures. What sets this adventure apart is a pretty robust social role-playing encounter at a dinner party that makes extensive use of the influence system introduced in the Game Mastery Guide, though the rules you need are in the adventure here too if you don't have that book. If that's something that sounds appealing to you, this adventure may be right up your alley. It also has some good battles and exploration, a little bit of everything, and it makes use of the Forest multi-pack and the Shipwrecks flip mats. Scenario 4 is the Devil-Wrought Disappearance by Joseph Blomqvist for levels 3 to 6. It does contribute to the meta plot, and it uses the Tavern multi-pack and Flip Mat Classics Watch Station maps. This particular mission takes you to Agorian, the capital city of Cheliax, where the Pathfinders are outlawed. You're traveling there to investigate the disappearance of a Pathfinder venture captain, and this is also a first of a two-parter. Part 2 can be found in Scenario 7, which we'll be talking about shortly. Told you that we had a lot to cover today. This scenario has a lot of positive reviews. There's a good mix of action, investigation, espionage, role-playing, tactics, and combat, and who doesn't like being able to play in the infernal tyranny that is Cheliax? Okay, Scenario 5 is Inheritor's Rite by Elizabeth V. Nold for levels 1 to 4. This is another metaplot adventure and uses the City Sites multi-pack flip mat and the Dungeon Perils flip tiles expansion pack. Keep in mind that you can also extract these mats from the PDF itself to use on your virtual tabletops of choice. And if you remember, this is part 2 of the adventure in Almas, continued from Scenario 2. If you've ever wanted an adventure in a courtroom, here you go. You have to present a legal defense to the People's Council of Andoran to prevent the Pathfinder Society's lodges there from being taken over by the Church of Iomade. And there are mechanics for courtroom arguments, but as you might imagine, some action breaks out halfway through the case. There is an attack on the lodge, and an all out-of-control Pathfinder construct randomly animated some souvenirs and causing just a general ruckus. It is crazy. Folks are saying that this is a fun module, but you may need to beef up some of the encounters as they may not be challenging enough as written. Scenario 6 is Struck by Shadows by Luis Loza for levels 3 to 6, and it's another metaplot adventure. It makes use of the Haunted Dungeons multipack and the Dungeon Starter set of flip tiles if you have them. This mission brings us back to Absalom, where the Grand Lodge is under assault once again. So you're on defense from the beginning, trying to fend off this attack. You'll be venturing all over the lodge, hunting down these strange shadow intruders. And it is all about trying to figure out the strange conspiracy that seems to be afoot to bring down the Pathfinder Society. As you can imagine, this is a combat-heavy scenario that does feature some similar combatants in each fight, so it's definitely aimed at those groups who want to test out their combat mettle. And finally, for this video at least, we have Scenario 7, The Locked Lodge by Kalervo. I'm going to mispronounce your name, I'm so sorry. Oikarinen. I'm sorry. This scenario is for levels 3 to 6. Yep, you guessed it. This one continues the metaplot, and it is the second part of the Cheliax mini arc. Here, the Pathfinder agents have to infiltrate the abandoned Pathfinder Society lodge and rescue the missing venture captain from the agents of the House Thrum. And we learn why the Hell Knights seem to be moving against the Pathfinder Society. This is reported to be a great adventure with great role-playing moments and a fun setting in the abandoned lodge in Cheliax. The only problem is that this adventure features some custom maps that seem to be rather difficult to use on some virtual tabletop services, so if you run into that problem, you may want to check out the Paizo forums to see if folks have found a good solution yet. Pathfinder players are pretty fantastic problem solvers, and all of these Pathfinder Society missions are again available at Paizo.com. You can enjoy them individually, just play the mini arcs, just play the overall meta arc, or play the whole season. If you have played any of these, I'd love to hear about your experiences in the comments section down below. And finally, they like to throw in some promo cards for the Pathfinder Adventure card game, and this time we got a Grandilo. I love it. Let me know what you think about these products in the comment section down below. What are you most excited about? What have you enjoyed at your own table? Let's discuss. Now let me tell you about something new from Hit Point Press. The Fablemaker's animated tarot deck brings the magic of tarot to your 5e games. Combine the new deck with the Fablemaker's tarot guidebook to enhance your games in many unexpected ways. The guidebook will teach you all about using tarot in your real life, but also how to use these gorgeous cards to inspire your RPG creativity. From creating NPC backstories on the fly, to enhancing your PC's motivations and history and more. The deck comes with 78 fully animated cards with 8 frames of lenticular looping animation each, and the illustrated guidebook is 280 pages long to help you get the most out of your new deck, whether you're using it for personal readings or to spark your creativity in your RPGs, or both. Pre-order the Tarot Guidebook, deck, or box set today and get a free PDF of the Fablemaker's Tarot deck and guidebook with your order. Shape your story at animatedtarot.com. And you also need to check out the Epic Encounter boxes by our friends at Steamforged Games. These boxes are made using 5e rules, but if you want to run them in the Pathfinder system, I am not going to rat you out. Each box gives you some amazing unpainted minis. You can get minion boxes with 20 awesome minis in each box, or their companion boss boxes, which have one enormous detailed mini for that final confrontation. We've reviewed every single box here on the channel, so you can go get a look at all the minis and all the maps that they've ever made. These are the perfect gift for the game lover in your life. Go check out the Epic Encounter series today at steamforged.com or by using the link below the video. And thank you for watching today. If you actually watched this entire video, let me know down in the comments so I can give you some love, because that's commitment. Just leave me a comment with the word Kobold. and I'll send you some love. And thank you to Grady for editing this monster of a video too and watching me film it. Don't forget to check out our Kickstarter for our Cobalt plushes at cobaltplush.com, which is shaping up to be an event. And check out Queerfinder. You can find it at queerfinder.org. If you want to say in what we review next, come join our Patreon family at patreon.com/thegallantgoblin. Liking, sharing, and subscribing helps us out a lot. And you can click the little bell icon below me to be notified when we drop new videos. You can also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Until next time, thank you for joining the Pathfinder Hour. Take care, have fun, love each other, and I'll see you next time at the Gallant Goblin.